Everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. The state of Georgia has done a really good job with funding broadband before they're ever going to get the $1.3 billion that they're going to be getting from the BEAD program. Be right back with more details. Thanks for joining me. Rick Uzzi here with Broadband Deployment News. So I saw this story and it was about my home state of Georgia. So I thought I would look at this real quick and then maybe look at some of the numbers behind it. So you see here, this was an interview with the Georgia Broadband Office, how Georgia is getting broadband to the most unserved of its unserved areas. One of the key things that keeps state broadband officials awake at night is the possibility that there may be unserved areas of the state where no provider wants to deploy service, even with a subsidy. The good news is that at least one state, Georgia, found a way to get bids for and ultimately get service to the state's most unserved areas. So good news there, because these are some of the most unserved areas in the state. And again, this is all before any BEAD funding comes to the state of Georgia. So this is Telecompetitor, and they talked to Jessica Simmons, who is the Georgia State broadband official there, the Deputy State Chief Information Officer and Executive Director of the Georgia Broadband Program. And they talked to them about how the state achieved that and about the state's plan for the $1.3 billion in BEAD rural broadband deployment funding that will be coming its way. The funding program that was so successful is Georgia's Capital Projects Fund program, which awarded funding in 2 rounds. And they call it the Capital Projects Fund. And some of it came from the Federal Capital Projects Fund, but some of it also came from the other fund that was part of ARPA. So this is just a fund that Georgia uses for sending out these broadband grants. I'm assuming that BEAD funding may come through this as well. I don't know if they'll create a new kind of name for that fund or if they'll just continue sending everything through their capital projects fund that they've set up for this. So as Simmons explained, in one of the rounds, we didn't put every county out for bid. We just targeted the most unserved. The program was successful. She said we had applications for every project area and made an award in all areas that were eligible following a challenge process. The vast majority of funding awarded will go to fiber broadband deployment, Simmons said. In addition, a few providers will use hybrid fiber coax or HFC. That would be cable modem service. And a few locations will receive fixed wireless service. So obviously, if there was already somebody out there that was providing cable modem service in an area and they just needed to extend that a little bit, they're going to let them do that with their current cable modem service. And the fixed wireless, I'm assuming, would be areas that were very expensive to serve with fiber. When we spoke to Simmons in late August, the state had obligated nearly all the funding it received for the broadband deployments through the U.S. State and Local Fiscal Recovery Program and the U.S. Capital Projects Fund, about $660 million in total. So both of those are funds that were part of the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. And states didn't have to use that for broadband. ARPA was, it was a coronavirus kind of package and was meant to help states recover from the fact that they weren't getting as much state tax revenue, those kinds of things, and could be applied towards lots of different projects, including infrastructure and broadband. And a lot of states, including Georgia, took a lot of advantage of that as far as broadband goes. Service providers will also contribute to project cost, yielding a total of budget of about $1 billion. And actually, I came up with more than that. My numbers don't completely match, but I looked at what Georgia was awarded and what they were awarding, So back in February 2022, they awarded $408 million from the state and local fiscal recovery part of ARPA. And that got 80% match because they basically, with the matches, were able to do $738 million or target that money towards $738 million towards those areas. And that was 132,000 locations. And then in January 2023, they awarded $234 million, and with the match, that came to $455 million. So that was like a 95% match that they were getting on those funds. And there they were targeting those towards 76,000 unserved areas. So if you look at all of those areas together and the amount of money, if you look at just the federal funding portion of that, that comes to about a little over $3,000 per location. And then you throw the match in there. So they're able to cover all those locations. And again, good size matches. I don't know if they'll be able to get all of that for BEAD. They may, if they were able to show that they could get this much through the ARPA funding. And if they can, who knows? Because those funds together, the federal funding through ARPA and then the matches come to almost as much as they're going to get from BEAD. It was like almost 1.2 billion total for those. And then you look at the one, I think it was 1.2, and then you look at 1.3 billion that they're getting through BEAD. If they could get a similar match or something close, like 70-80%, then they'll be over $2 billion in the BEAD program. So that's really looking good for the state of Georgia, because they're making good use of these funds. So proud of my state. You see here, still remaining in Georgia's budget is $5 million in CPF money that the state aims to use for hotspots in a program targeting the state library system. So they've got $5 million now left over that they can spend for that, and know that they've got all this other money, this $1.3 billion coming through BEAD. It talks about their Georgia map here. The $1.3 billion in BEAD funding will be coming to Georgia, is one of the highest allocations for any state. The broadband map that the state created likely played a role in ensuring that the state received its fair share. The broadband map, the Georgia broadband map, I don't know if it's changed, but it was kind of cool where you could look at the time, what was the FCC map based on just census block data, not the new FCC map. And then Georgia had their map, and you could swipe back and forth and see the difference and see how many more unserved areas there actually were. But I'm sure a lot of the data behind it is what allowed them to make good use of these funds. It says that here. In fact, it says state was able to file challenges to the FCC availability data in time to impact the BEAD allocations. The state challenged availability data for tens of thousands of locations, and the FCC accepted the vast majority of them. The state was not able to challenge the location data in time to impact allocations, but according to Simmons, location data in version 2 of the FCC map, the one that was used for BEAD allocations, was more accurate in comparison with the first version. That's absolutely true. It's much more accurate. So that's good to know. So the location data, they challenge. So at first they challenged the availability data. So that is broadband available in a particular location. For some reason, they weren't able to challenge the location data. That to me is more the broadband serviceable locations. That would be like the fabric data. So that is something that states can't do. So once this last FCC map had come out, then that kind of put a nail in where all of these locations that are supposed to get broadband are. So if there's a location in Georgia that is a broadband serviceable location that is not on the FCC map at this point, Georgia still has to provide service to that, but they did not get funding for that particular location. So, and each state has that same issue. But the better that the states did with challenging that data, and the better that their internet service providers in their states did with challenging that data, then the better that data was on the FCC map. The plan to establish the Georgia Broadband Office came in 2018. Simmons joined in 2021. The office has 4 dedicated employees, which for a state the size of Georgia is, and 1.3 billion doesn't sound like much, right? But as Simmons explained, the agency works closely with other state agencies to accomplish its goals. What Georgia has done is taken advantage of economies of scale and pull resources from other state agencies that have knowledge and expertise. And I am all a fan for that, especially considering I pay taxes here in Georgia, because if unfortunately, a lot of time government gets bigger and bigger and bigger, even if you don't necessarily have to. And we see that with our federal government, but a lot of times states like Georgia are very, very cognizant of the fact that they need to keep taxes reasonable for their citizens. And so I'm very happy that they are looking to other resources within the state. They obviously need people like Jessica to focus on this and the other employees in the broadband office. But if they can leverage other parts of the state to do some of the work here, then that's great. And again, that's great use of taxpayer funding. She noted, for example, that the University of Georgia worked on the broadband map. The Georgia Broadband Office is largely focused on the BEAD program today. The state already has submitted its 5-year plan to NTIA for approval and is in the process of drafting Volume 1 and Volume 2 of its initial proposal. And actually, Volume 1 is already up. I'll show you in a minute. Georgia has been able to move quickly, Simmons said. For more information about Georgia Broadband, including funding, programs, and links, you can click on this Broadband Nation page for Georgia, which is I think a Telecompetitor site. So, and as I mentioned, by the way, I linked to that article and I linked to this. This is where you can see which states have submitted their 5-year action plans, which should be all of them at this point, I believe by the end of this month, they all need to be there, because by the end of, this is like right where the deadline is for all the states as far as when they got their initial planning funds. The deadline is coming up for this. So now as I scroll down this list from what I looked at the other day, I see lots and lots of states. I didn't count to see if this was all 50. Maybe I'll go back and do that later. But we see here lots of states. And, they don't necessarily get up here right when they submit it. NTIA has to receive it and then post it up here. Then you've got your draft digital equity plans. Then over here, you've got your draft BEAD initial proposals. And you can see a lot of these proposals up here now. And there's links. I think the links are here if they're still have not been approved and are open for public comment, possibly. So you've got Alaska, Delaware, Georgia. You see volume 1 is up here. So they have posted volume 1. You've got Kansas, Kentucky, et cetera. You've got Louisiana, who, again, this is not linked at this point. So I believe that I heard their plan has been approved, and they've got their volume 2 up here. So their volume 1 is approved. They've got their volume 2 up here now. You got the rest of these have got volume 1s. And then down here, you've got Vermont's got initial proposal, volume 1 looks like it's approved, and they've got volume 2 up. And then same here for Virginia. Virginia 1 looks like it's approved, or it's maybe no longer open for comment. Maybe that's what it means. And then you've got the initial proposal, volume 2 is linked here. So, and states could do volume 1 and volume 2. Doing volume 1 first would help them get started on the challenge process quicker. So the NTI broke it up into a volume 1 and volume 2, so they could do certain parts of the initial proposal first and get that out of the way. And some states took advantage of that. Some states, I think, it's possible that a couple of these posted their volume 1 and volume 2 at the same time. I forgot to look back and, hadn't been really paying attention. I think I do remember somebody did do both at the same time. So again, there's a link to this if you want to check out that page. And then I also linked to the 2 press releases when Georgia made the announcements. If you want a little bit of more information about those, this is where they announced the $408 million from the state and local fiscal recovery fund, and then this was how much was this? 200 something million from the capital projects fund. So there's the details there. So again, proud of my state for what they're doing there, and hopefully that will continue with the BEAD funding. That they'll be able to be very efficient with how they handle those funds. They're obviously on top of things. They've got their initial proposal out. Sounds like they're working on part 2, and that'll be out soon as well. So small office, but they're making the most out of the state resources that they have. So that's good to see. And it's a good model for other states that are maybe thinking about how they can handle limited resources, because states got a lot of planning funds to be able to hire, but sometimes it's hard to find people. We know that. So, and even if you can hire people, if you can hire fewer people and put that money towards actually putting broadband where it belongs and where people need it, that's a better thing to do. So thanks for joining me today. If this was helpful, if you'd give me a like on the video. If you're not subscribed to our channel, click the subscribe button and click the bell, and you will be notified when I'm live. Tomorrow, I'm planning on doing something about the net neutrality rearing its head again at the FCC. Chairman Rosenworcel had hinted that was coming, and then she did a speech yesterday and talked about that. So I thought I would cover that tomorrow, maybe talk a little bit about what she said. So hope to see you then. Thanks for joining me. Take care. Bye-bye.